Welcome to the regular Faroese News Report. We're going through your source documents from Monday, January 5th, 2026, to really pull out the key insights on the issues shaping the country.
Today we're looking at governance under a lot of pressure, both at home and also internationally, plus some pretty deep cultural and financial debates.
Right, so for our news headlines, we'll be covering the legal challenge to the Runavik election rerun.
Then the new free abortion law and how doctors are divided on it.
After that, a look at the Coastal Fishing Association's report on 2025.
And finally, the U.S. president's comments on Greenland and a pretty controversial social media post.
And once we're through the news, we'll shift over to the opinion pages. First up, the kitchen must be made bigger.
Followed by P's arguing that property tax is an extra burden on households.
Then a look at how the increased retirement age doesn't quite cover a decreased state grant.
And we'll end on the big one, the inquiry on foreign religious symbols and the debate over an Islamic center.
Okay, so let's jump right in. We've got this really fascinating legal and political situation in Runavíkur municipality. A court hearing is scheduled for tomorrow, and it's trying to halt a mandated rerun election. This is more than just local politics.
Oh, absolutely. The lawsuit is filed directly against the Ministry of Finance. The hearing tomorrow, January 6th, is at the Faroese High Court.
And the Ministry of Finance is involved because they sort of inherited this, right?
Exactly. They took over the responsibility from the former Ministry of Justice, which was the body that actually ordered the rerun in the first place.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the sources show this lawsuit isn't coming from the municipality itself.
No, it's not. It's a personal lawsuit. The plaintiffs are the mayor, the deputy mayor, and 3 other city council members.
So they're suing personally?
Yes, personally.
Yeah.
They tried to get the whole city council to back a municipal lawsuit, but couldn't get the votes. So they're going it alone.
And the goal here is to stop this rerun election, an election that was ordered because of an accusation of fraud over a single vote.
One single invalidated vote in Oyndarfjörður. And because of that, an entire election of about 3,000 votes is being thrown out.
So the plaintiffs have, what, 4 key arguments against this? Which one do they think is their strongest?
Well, they seem to be hitting it from all angles, but the sharpest arguments are really about due process and proportionality.
Okay, so due process first.
Right. They're claiming a principle of part-shoring due process was violated. The 5 council members who actually won the election, they were never formally heard before the ministry, just invalidated the whole thing.
So the winners weren't even consulted before their win was taken away?
Not formally, no. And that leads to their second and maybe more powerful argument, proportionality.
Which is?
That invalidating an entire election over one single contested vote is just, well, it's excessively intrusive. It violates that core legal idea that the remedy has to fit the scale of the problem.
That does seem like a pretty powerful point. But they also have issues with the facts the decision was based on, right? And the ministry's independence.
Yes, exactly. The third argument is that the decision was poorly informed. It relied only on the initial accusation, and it didn't even wait for or use the findings from the police investigation.
So they acted before all the facts were in.
That's the claim. And fourth, they're tackling a potential conflict of interest, what they call Oldignite. The permanent secretary of the former Ministry of Justice, her husband, is the defense lawyer for the accused electoral board chairman.
Wow.
And the plaintiffs are arguing that just having her step aside wasn't enough. They think the entire ministry should have recused itself to avoid even the appearance of a conflict.
So the immediate goal for tomorrow's hearing is crucial.
It is. The court has to decide if this lawsuit should put a temporary stop to the rerun election that's scheduled for next week. If the judge says yes, this whole legal fight could drag on for a while.
All right, moving from a local legal fight to a major national one. A change that affects every woman in the Faroes. The new abortion law.
A huge shift. After decades of a very restrictive policy, the Langtinget finally broke the deadlock.
Just barely, though.
Oh, just barely. On December 4th, the Faroes Parliament passed the new law by a vote of 17 to 16. It grants women the right to a free abortion up to the end of the 12th week of pregnancy.
And this overturns the old law from 1956. Can you just remind us what that law required?
The old law was incredibly strict. It only allowed abortions in very exceptional cases, like a severe risk to the woman's life or health, or if the fetus had a severe incurable illness.
And doctors could face jail time.
They could. We have a quote here from a gynecologist at the National Hospital, Diana Renston, who expressed, well, Just immense relief.
What does she say?
She said she believes the Faroes has become a better place for women. She talked about the terrible position the old law put her in, spending her limited time evaluating these highly stressed women based on criteria like anxiety or social problems.
All while under the threat of prison.
Yes, facing up to 2 years in prison if she approved a request that authorities later decided didn't qualify. That threat is gone now, at least for the first trimester.
So given how divisive this was, that 1716 vote, what's the official position of the Faroese Medical Association?
Officially, they're neutral. The association says it's because of deep divisions among their own board and their members.
But I imagine there's more to it than that.
There is. If you look at a member survey they did 2 years ago, the support among doctors themselves was overwhelming. 89% of doctors were in favor of introducing free abortion up to 12 weeks.
So the professionals on the ground wanted the change, even if the organization stayed on the fence.
Precisely. The head of the association basically said this whole debate perfectly reflects the deep split in a small Faroese society, a society built on very strong Christian values. The law has changed, but that cultural divide is still very much there.
Okay, while the parliament was dealing with those major social issues, let's take a quick look at one of the country's economic pillars. The Coastal Fishing Association, the Suðurstreymoyar Útgerðarfelag, just had its annual general meeting.
Right, and they gave an update on their work. They reported really good cooperation with Tórshavn Harbor, which has improved conditions, and they're continuing their work with Barry Degree for fish receiving.
But the big takeaway here seems to be their lobbying work. They had a pretty major win last year.
A huge win for their members. When the fishing days for the Group 5B boats ran out early, back in mid-October, they went straight to the authorities.
And what was their argument?
It was about parity, really. They successfully argued that unused fishing days should be transferred to Group 5B. They just based their case on the principle that if other fishing groups can transfer days between years and groups, then 5B should have the same right.
Makes sense. And what was the overall assessment of 2025 for the coastal fleet?
Very positive. The association's chairman called it a good year. He reported favorable catches and good prices, which is, some welcome economic stability.
And the board was reelected?
The entire board, yes.
Yeah.
Which shows the members are clearly happy with the direction they're heading.
Now let's pivot, and it's a sharp pivot, to geopolitical tension. Our last news story is about the North Atlantic, specifically Greenland and the U.S., right after the U.S. military action in Venezuela.
This is a serious escalation in rhetoric. The day after the U.S. attacked Venezuela, the U.S. president went on record with The Atlantic and repeated his statement that the U.S. needs Greenland.
And when the interviewer pressed him on what that means for Greenland,
his response was very dismissive. He just said it was, and I quote, up to others to assess. He then used the interview to issue a very direct warning to the new Venezuelan president.
He said her fate would be worse than Maduro's if she didn't follow instructions.
He did. The timing of that, combined with the Greenland comment, is, well, it's notable.
And this happened right as a very provocative image was posted online.
That's right. Katie Miller, who is the wife of the influential advisor Stephen Miller, she posted an image on X. It was a picture of Greenland wrapped in an American flag with the caption, "Just soon."
Soon. That's not subtle.
Not at all. And it got over 2 million views, so it was impossible for diplomats to just ignore it.
I can imagine. How did the Danish ambassador even begin to respond to something like that?
Well, the ambassador to the U.S. responded right away on X. The tone was very firm, but, diplomatic.
What was the message?
He stressed that Denmark and the U.S. are NATO allies. And then, crucially, he pointed out that the Kingdom of Denmark is massively increasing its Arctic security, spending $13.7 billion in 2025.
So reminding them of the alliance and their own investment.
Exactly. The core message was a demand for full respect for the Kingdom of Denmark's territorial integrity. It was a very direct pushback.
And what was the feeling inside Greenland itself? Was there panic?
A digital editor from the Greenlandic media outlet Srmitsiak said there was real concern among some citizens. He cited that exact sentiment you hear. Today, Venezuela. Tomorrow, Greenland.
But he also drew a distinction.
Yes, a very important one. He stressed that Greenland is a functioning democracy. It's fundamentally different from the dictatorship in Venezuela that the U.S. targeted. And that distinction is really key for their own sense of security.
Okay, let's shift gears now and unpack some of the big opinion and political pieces, starting with this economic strategy debate. The kitchen must be made bigger.
This is an argument from MP Elspeth Mercedes Gunleg's daughter. She's basically saying the Faroes' innovation can't stop at fishing, aquaculture, and tourism.
So the country is educating its young people to a high level, but then they're just leaving.
That's the core of her argument. She wants to create what she calls Vatanartung, Sturv high-level, knowledge-based jobs to keep that talent at home. She says, why are we letting our best and brightest become an export commodity?
And she points to other small countries as a model for this.
She does. She looks at Iceland, which has successfully marketed laser eye surgery combined with tourism, and Hungary, which does the same with dental care. The idea is to sell a specialized service along with the unique Faroes travel experience.
So what's her specific proposal for the Faroes?
She suggests that Klaksvíkar Sjúkrahús, the hospital in Klaksvík, could sell highly specialized medical services internationally. Things like urology or knee and shoulder surgery.
But she adds a pretty big condition to that, doesn't she?
A crucial one. She says, for this to work, the Faroes has to be the very best in whatever field it chooses. You have to be able to compete on quality on a global scale.
And she's got a proof of concept, in a way.
She does. She points to the Atlantic Airways Simulator Center as a successful example of attracting global customers for a very specialized high-tech service. She sees it as proof that this model can work and can help build the country's economic future.
All right, now for a big domestic debate. Property tax. The Sjálvstýri Party has a proposal, but columnist Samuel Matras Christensen is pushing back hard.
He is. The proposal itself is for a progressive property tax, but it would only apply to a person's second house and any houses after that. The idea is to cool down speculation and help first-time buyers.
But Christensen's argument is that owning two houses in the Faroes doesn't automatically make you some kind of big owner or speculator.
Exactly. He says a tax like this would hit people in small, remote villages the hardest. You know, people on the outer islands who might need a small apartment on the mainland for work or travel.
Or people who've just inherited the family home.
Right. It could be a second, not very valuable home on a small island that they inherited from their parents. He warns this could force ordinary people to sell or even demolish these inherited properties. It's a uniquely Faroese problem.
He also calls property tax a slippery slope.
He does. He points to Denmark's system, which has had all sorts of problems with valuation errors, creating a lot of legal uncertainty for homeowners. He sees it as an intrusive intervention.
And what about the rental market?
His critique there is pretty straightforward. He argues that any property tax would just be passed on from the landlord to the tenant in the form of higher rent, and it might discourage people from building new rental properties in the first place.
So if he's against the tax, what does he suggest instead to tackle the housing problem?
He has two main ideas, neither of which involves a new tax. First, enforce stricter zoning rules to stop short-term rentals, like Airbnb, from taking over residential areas. He thinks that could free up thousands of homes for long-term residents.
And the second idea?
To be more targeted with interest subsidies. Make sure they only go to actual first-time buyers to help them get into the market without just inflating prices for everyone else.
Okay, shifting from housing policy to national fiscal policy. MP Helgi Abramson has a pretty sharp critique of the government's whole approach to financial sustainability.
He's pointing out a major paradox, a real contradiction in their messaging versus their actions. The government is pushing a plan to increase the retirement age,
which they say is all about improving long-term fiscal health.
Right. The current retirement age is 67.5. The plan is to raise it to 68.5 in 2035 and then up to 69 in 2038.
And the savings from that would be what?
The government estimates that for each year the retirement age goes up, the Treasury saves about 50 million DKK in state pensions. So that's the long-term benefit they're promoting.
So where's the paradox? Where does Abrahamson's criticism come in?
It comes from what the government is doing right now. While they're talking about those future savings, the current coalition has been intentionally decreasing the Danish state grant, the Ríkisvætingin.
By how much?
By 25 million DKK every year for the last 4 years. That's an immediate intentional loss of 100 million DKK in funding.
Wait, so the immediate hole they're digging is twice as big as the annual savings they're projecting from making people work longer?
That is exactly his point. They're making the immediate fiscal situation worse by 100 million DKK, which is far more than the 50 million they hope to save annually, a decade from now.
That's a powerful criticism.
It is. And he finishes with this really provocative thought experiment. He says, if you wanted to cover the rest of the state grant, which is 542 million DKK only by raising the retirement age, well, Faroese people would have to work until they were about 80 years old.
Wow, just to illustrate the scale of the funding gap.
Precisely.
And for our final topic, we're turning to a very significant and very charged public debate about the proposal for an Islamic center in the Faroes.
This is a conversation that's touching on political, historical, and sociological nerves. It really kicked off when MP Janus of Rana filed a formal parliamentary inquiry on January 4th.
And he had three very direct questions for the prime minister.
Very direct. He asked, one, what are the procedures for placing foreign religious symbols or structures in the Faroes? Two, what options does the government have to limit or prevent that? And three, does the government actually plan to implement any of those restrictions?
So it's a clear political challenge to try and stop the center before it even starts.
Absolutely. And Rana framed the public divide very clearly. He said proponents see any opposition as just intolerance. But opponents, they fear it's opening the door to an ideology that could lead to parallel societies and integration problems, pointing to the experiences of neighboring countries.
And this political concern is backed up by a couple of related opinion pieces. Let's start with the historical one from Baraur Alagjuni.
Right. Alagjuni gives this really interesting historical context. He points out that when the first mosque in the Nordics opened in Denmark back in 1967, there was very little political opposition.
But today it's a different story.
A completely different story. Today, Danish leaders are openly critical about issues like Sharia courts, negative social control, and crime within some Muslim communities. So Alagjuni's conclusion is that the Faroes needs to protect its Judeo-Christian heritage and should learn from its neighbors' challenges and not permit the center.
And then we have a more sort of academic take from Rune Johannesson using network theory.
Yes, he analyzes what a religious center actually does for an immigrant network. He argues it acts as a network engine.
A network engine. What does he mean by that?
He means it stabilizes and coordinates the network. It takes relationships from being informal and individual, and it moves them to an institutional level. He says because Muslim immigrant networks often have very high internal cohesion, strong family bonds, faith integrated into daily life. A center like this massively accelerates the network's growth and structure.
So the fear isn't just about religion, it's about the center acting as an institutional catalyst that could create the very parallel societies that people are worried about.
That is precisely the warning. Johannesson says this mechanism, which is often helped by external funding, can lead to the formation of these parallel societies.
Yeah.
And he warns that once that structure is established and institutionalized, it becomes very, very difficult to reverse.
Well, that covers a huge amount of ground today, from, municipal legal battles to geopolitical risks and these really deep cultural debates over identity and the economy.
It's clear the Faroese political and social landscape is anything but quiet. We've touched on electoral justice, fundamental healthcare rights, economic strategy, fiscal integrity, and that defining question of national identity in a globalized world.
Like and subscribe to Pulse Fundamentals for more content like this. Sources linked below.